On today's episode for 5 Tips for Tuba, we interview Dr. Beth Wiese, professor of tuba and euphonium at Appalachian State University. On 5 Tips, we ask world-class tuba and euphonium players a simple question. If you could only practice 5 things, what would those 5 things be? Before we talk with Dr. Wiese about what we should be practicing, we want to get to know her a little bit better. So, Dr. Wiese, my first question for you is, how did you start playing the tuba?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Jerome, for having me. Jerome and I go way back as classmates together doing our master's at Yale. And I got my start playing the tuba when I was in the 5th grade. I started as a euphonium player. And the story goes that we chose band instruments in alphabetical order, right? And my last name, beginning with a W, did not leave me many options. so I got stuck with a euphonium, and pretty shortly thereafter, like a few months thereafter, the opportunity came up to play the tuba, and I thought, why not? We've made it this far, and so I started on the tuba then in probably the end of 5th grade, and I played throughout high school. I was also a really serious violinist at the time. Thought I would go into violin, and then just kind of decided that I wanted a career in tuba playing at the last minute. And so I went to Lawrence University, which is in Wisconsin. It's a small school in Wisconsin, and I studied with a guy named Marty Erickson. Very, very friendly guy. And from there, I went on to do my master's at Yale with Jerome, studying with Mike Rylance of the Boston Symphony. And after that, I went to do my doctorate at Northwestern, studying with Rex Martin. And at that point, I got a fellowship in the New World Symphony, and was really fortunate to spend a couple of years there studying and performing. And from there, I got the position I'm currently in, which is teaching tuba and euphonium at Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina. So it's been a wild ride, for sure, but it's been really enjoyable. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. I definitely have a lot of things that I want to follow up with. First of all, I got to admit, I'm thinking about changing the question of how did you get started playing the tuba to how did you get tricked into playing the tuba? Since so many of us switch over from other instruments, even though I myself have always played tuba. So I guess my question for you, Beth, is how do you think your experience on the violin relates to your experience and your success on the tuba?
Okay. That's a great question. So first of all, did you really start on the tuba?
I started on the tuba. That's a long story that we'll save for another time. But yeah, I've only played tuba and a little bit of singing. But did you start violin before tuba or?
Yeah, so my parents I was convinced that I wanted to be a violinist when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. I have an older brother who at the time had just begun cello. So I was convinced I wanted to play the violin. I begged for it for like every holiday I could imagine. And so my parents made me start on piano first. And so I took a year of piano and was only mediocre, let's say. And then they let me start the violin, which is like probably in 2nd grade or so. And I would say it has a huge impact on how I approach the tuba, because I think starting at that age and with the violin comes like a lot of discipline. First of all, you were just kind of expected to do all this practicing, I did so many technical exercises, scales, etudes, things like this, and so much really, serious repertoire, from an early age, Mozart violin concertos, Bach partitas, Handel sonatas and things like this that that sort of music just became like indoctrinated for me from a really early age. And that really affects how I think I approach the tuba now. And that's still the music that I love to play, even though there's this and not a violin anymore, you know? I think that had a really big impact. And actually, I went on, part of my doctoral dissertation was transcribing a violin piece of Bach for tuba, because I really see a lot of parallels between the two, you know?
What actually attracted you to the tuba? Was it the sound of the instrument? Did you have a teacher, a private teacher on tuba back then, or?
I did, yeah. So I've been really lucky. We were talking a little bit about the band culture in Texas. When I was growing up in Iowa, and there's a really strong music culture there, where first of all, students have lessons throughout the day, like as part of your school day. Short, but still you had private lessons. But then also, I took private lessons from the very beginning. From the minute I started, I had a private teacher who was actually a tuba player, in fact. And I gotta be honest, I wasn't really drawn to the tuba at first.
Oh wow.
You know, I wasn't like one of those, like, I feel like tuba players either are like the misfits. Sorry, no offense. You know, like the kids who, you know, kind of try every other instrument and then just kind of end up there. Or they're the people who really like to stand out and be different. You know, they want to be like the class clown, and that was not me at all. Like, I was like the serious violin, you know, player. But what I've really grown to love is the timbre of the instrument. If I could play another brass instrument, I would play the horn, probably for the same reason. I really love the timbre, the color, that darkness, which definitely affects which instruments I play too, by the way, and mouthpieces. And so I think I was really drawn to the timbre above anything else. And then the rest, I started to love the rest of the instrument after the fact.
Wonderful. So throughout high school, you were working a lot on both tuba and violin, and then you ended up going to Lawrence. Is it Lawrence Conservatory or Lawrence University?
It's Lawrence University, but Lawrence Conservatory is part of Lawrence University.
Ah.
Yeah. Okay. The fun fact about Marty Erickson is that I actually work for two band directors here in the Houston area that have both studied with Marty, I believe at Eastern Michigan. So, you know, it's always a fun connection. But I guess it's not that much of a surprise, because any teacher that has such a great career as a teacher and a performer as Marty Erickson, surely his students are all over the place.
And someone like Marty too. Like, I don't think there's a stranger to him in our field. You know, everybody knows Marty. He's just Marty, you know.
Absolutely. And maybe this is foreshadowing for a future episode of 5 Tips, but at any rate, how did you choose Lawrence? Is that fairly close to where you grew up in Iowa, or?
No, this is a fun story. Okay, sorry. Benny, shh. This is a really fun story. So my senior year of high school, I was studying tuba with a guy named Andy Mast. Betty, that's enough. I was studying. You can cut that part. So my senior year of high school, I was studying tuba with a guy named Andy Mast in Davenport, Iowa, where I grew up. And he said to me, "Hey, there's a school named Lawrence University that you should check out." It wasn't that close, maybe 5 hours from my house. And I just kind of on a whim thought, okay, you know, whatever. And it turns out he told me that because he was then hired as the director of bands that year.
Oh, okay.
And so he and I both went to Lawrence the same year. And so that's the connection. I had never heard of the school, never knew anything about it, just went up and auditioned. And fun thing about Marty is there's never a short conversation with him. My audition was like 2.5 hours long. And I remember leaving the audition being like, whoa, what just happened? I don't know. I hope he watches this. Yeah, and so it was just sort of one of those like fortuitous circumstances where the stars just aligned, and it just kind of happened, you know?
I do have one other topic that I want to talk about before we get into what we should be practicing on the tuba, which is that you have established yourself as a world-class performer on the instrument. This is a part that I really enjoy about doing these interviews because hopefully it gives me a chance to kind of brag for my friends and colleagues in this game. But you were in the New World Symphony. Were you the only, or I should say, were you the first woman to play tuba in the New World Symphony?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, so I think of all the places I've been, I think I was the first female at the New World Symphony. According to Carl Topolo, I think I was the first female at the National Repertory Orchestra. There's since been a few others. I think I was the second female at Tanglewood, behind Connie Weldon.
Connie Weldon, I saw that the other day, yeah.
So yeah, it's I don't really think about it, but it is cool. It's a neat honor for sure.
Well, it's certainly a unique thing and obviously trailblazing in many ways, but just the fact that you have all these orchestral accomplishments as well as winning many of the solo competitions. I believe from what I read, there was an international competition. Was it in Italy that you won a few years back?
A few years, yeah, 2012. It's just a few years ago. Yeah. So I've done. I like what I like about my career so far. What it is nice for me is that it's been really diverse. I like to dabble personally. Like that's my personal style, and so I've had a chance to do some of those orchestral programs, those orchestral festivals, which you're really familiar with too, which I think really train you in one direction. And then preparing for these really big solo competitions, particularly in Europe, which are like longer and more intense. That's really a different aspect of playing completely. And then you get to teaching, which is like, I don't know, the third half of your brain, so to speak, So it's like gymnastics for your brain a little bit, trying to figure out all of those,
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that obviously prepared you very well for what you're doing today. So in addition to teaching tuba and euphonium at Appalachian State, are there any other projects that you're involved in right now?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so my teaching at Appalachian State is full-time, tenure track. I have a studio of 24 tuba and euphonium students right now. In addition to that, I play principal tuba in the Asheville Symphony. I like to call myself last chair B-flat tuba in the North Carolina Brass Band, which is North Carolina's only professional brass band. And I do a lot of sub work playing in Charlotte, Winston-Salem, kind of around anywhere within drivable distance. And I really love that because my background in violin playing, I should have said, was a lot in freelancing. From when I was middle high school level, I would show up, freelance a wedding or do things like that. And I love that. It's so engaging to me to show up and have to be on, And that's what I love about subbing, like sub work too. It's like you show up and you have to be on from that minute. And that's a really fun, another aspect of my playing, which I do quite a bit. Since COVID has hit, maybe a little bit less. But yeah, so I do quite a bit of that. And then I've also started to do a little bit more teaching, master classes, things like that. And so it's dabbling in all sorts of things, which I love. So
Incredible. I think that we're really seeing a snapshot right now of, a professional tuba player, professional teacher with a doctorate who is under 40 and just living what we kind of idealize as the complete music career, professional music career, full of teaching and performing. So I'm going to use that to get into the major element of our video today. And this has been really, really interesting for me, just editing these videos. I feel like I personally have improved. So I know I personally improved as a musician and a tuba player. So the question is, if you could only practice 5 things on the tuba, what would those 5 things be?
Oh, Jerome, this was such a good question, and I'm so glad you asked this. And I had a good time watching the video that you sent me with James Gourlay. And as I was trying to think about this, I was thinking about my own personal practice and how I approach the horn every day, right? And so, in thinking about 5 things to practice every day, the way that I approach your question is 5 aspects of playing that I want to make sure I cover every day. With my own practice, I have to say I don't have a set routine. I don't do the same thing every day, come hell or high water. I don't know if I can say hell, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't do the same thing every day. I need variety, right? I like that. And I think one thing that I have to say, I think Rex Martin, I'll give him a lot of credit for this, is he really taught me to think before I pick up my horn. What are you going to accomplish? What do you want to come out of your horn? And if you can't answer those questions, then maybe we should pause before picking up this hunk of brass, right? So along those lines, there's 5 things that I think are really, really important to my daily routine, okay? Number 1, it's really important that I play with a beautiful sound, okay? Number 2, I always, every day, as part of my playing, make it a priority to focus on playing with expressive style. Number 3, I want to focus clearly on clear articulation. Number 4, I try to touch on something that's going to get me working on that singing legato sound, right? Style, sorry. And number 5, I try to get this evenness across all registers. And within my daily routine, if I can touch on all 5 of these things, then I feel good, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that you are really touching on so many things that are specific to just being a great musician.
Yeah, that's really it. I always tell my students, you're musicians first and tubas second, right? Again, what do you want to come out of your instrument? You need to be able to answer that question, as a musician and then as a tubist. And so I think if we can walk into a practice room with that mindset, first of all, the sound coming out of our instrument is going to be more meaningful, but also this is a much more healthy and engaged way for me to think as a performer, right? I'm sure you've thought a lot about how we approach our instrument too, what are we thinking of in the moments before, during, and after we play? And I think that has a huge direct impact on the progress that we make in a practice room.
Great, absolutely. I can certainly relate to a lot of what you're saying. So I'm really curious as to how you actually put that into motion when you start your daily routine and when you start playing every day. So let's go back to number 1. Please rephrase this, but you're talking about trying to play with a beautiful sound, right?
Absolutely. Okay. So when playing with a beautiful sound, let me clarify something too about my daily routine. 2 things. Whenever I'm practicing fundamentals, that's for me the highest level of my playing all day. And so I make a really important distinction between fundamentals and warm-ups, right? I don't begin working on fundamentals until I'm warmed up, both mentally and physically. Because I think where my best playing of the day needs to be is when I'm working on really specific things, such as producing a beautiful sound, right? So, second of all, I really believe in working on excellence in one respect rather than mediocrity in like 2 or 3, right? So if I'm focusing on a beautiful sound, that's what I'm focusing on. I could be just pooping all over everything else, right? But my goal is to do one thing with excellence. And as part of this daily routine, I'll kind of demonstrate that, right? So, like I said, it really varies. What I play every day depends on what I'm preparing for and what my mindset is coming from either the previous practice session, the previous day, whatever, right? So in order to work on beautiful sound, I might do something really, really simple, like playing a nice long tone exercise. I recently enjoyed working on things without tongue. I think that really helps establish sound without working on articulation. But it really varies from day to day. In working on beautiful sound, I like to start with something really simple, right? I really believe that the goal here is excellence and not difficulty. So I might start with something really simple. There's any number of variations to these exercises, right? We all have these sort of long tones, and I think it's more about how you do them than what you're doing necessarily, because it can be done in any configuration. And what I'm doing here is trying to produce a beautiful sound, and if it's not to my liking, I go back and I fix it, right? I was watching one of your other videos, I think, where Mr. Goulet was talking about, Dr. Goulet was talking about breathing, and I can just tell you in the way that I just played that, I think I would probably go back and work on breathing for 2 seconds. Just focus on taking a really good breath, right? So forth. My goal here is, again, to produce a beautiful sound, and I won't go on until I do that.
So my question for you is that when you're talking about producing a beautiful sound, what are you modeling the sound after? Are you thinking more vocal? Are there specific tuba players? Where does that start for you?
I think it starts here, right? I think the way that music works, the way that tuba playing works, is that a sound is conceived here, it's communicated here, and it comes out our bell. 1, 2, 3, right? And so I think the way that we conceive the sound is really important, right? Am I hearing a really good sound in my head? And by that, I really mean conception of tone. I hear tuba when I play, personally. Something like this. If I'm playing a violin piece, actually that might change, right, for example. But where I might work right now is, okay, am I doing everything here the way I want it to? Because I can tell it's pretty good here. So then it's troubleshoot, I don't know, right here, you know. I might go back to the mouthpiece, right? And I might... And I might go back to buzzing and ask myself, am I producing a beautiful sound on the mouthpiece, right? Kind of doing the troubleshooting there. If that's the case, and I'm happy with that, then I'll move on, right? And go back to playing something again. I have a number of steps that I can take that I know will get me to producing a good sound. It's like when you learned how to tie your shoe, right? You went through all these steps.
Sure.
You know, where they, I don't know, loops or something, you know, bunnies or something like that. And you kind of went through these steps methodically. I still go through those in my own practice to produce a beautiful sound. It starts here, I do the work here, and then listen here for the result.
Great. I think that's so important because at least a lot of the students that I work with certainly don't seem to always have a goal in mind or don't really know what they should actually sound like. So once you feel like you've got that going, and do you do any other exercises? So these Remington style long tones, as well as buzzing the mouthpiece. Is there any? And you also talked about being conscious of your breathing, right, for producing a good sound. Is there anything else before you move on to the second thing?
Sure. Well, like I said, it really varies from day to day. I can tell you, you know, in all honesty, today, it's a Monday. Is it Monday? It's Monday. Yeah. You know, I didn't play so much yesterday, and I'm coming back to the tuba after, you know, kind of taking a day off. I would do more. I would probably go back to doing a few more exercises that are, again, all variations on a same theme of playing long, beautiful sound, right? We're all familiar with, for example, this one. Some variation. My goal here is to play until I think that I'm playing with a beautiful sound at the highest level that I can play. And until I get to that level, I'm going to keep playing material. I have tons of it. This Arnold Jacobs routine, you can open up an Arbin book and last a lifetime, right? The Remington ones you've talked about, Schlossberg, we could name these all day long. The goal, though, like I said, my one singular goal is doing them until I play with a beautiful sound. And what I do really varies every day because I can't be like, I'm not the kind of person to do the same thing every day, personally, just me. So that's what I would do, working on beautiful sound. And then that brings us to the next thing, which I think is really important, which was expressive style, right? And I think as, sorry, let me turn up my sound again. I think as tuba players, right, it's really important that we focus on practicing fundamentals with style. You know, I was talking to a high schooler once, and I was like, we were talking about, you know, their like all-state solo or something like that. And I was like, so, you know, when you're practicing, what are you working on? And they were like, well, you know, I'm working on playing like the right notes, the right rhythms. Like, I want to play like in tune, and I want to like have good tone. And then like, you know, I want to play all the dynamics that are on the page. And then like, I don't even know. They had like 2 hands full. And then they're like, and then maybe I'll work on style. I was like, oh no. I'm like, great, awesome. But I think style has to be part of our warm-up, part of our fundamentals. It has to be part of our fundamentals. And so I love exercises. Arbins are great for these. Something that's going to get my brain going. Blazevich are great too, right? I might do something, I think this is an Arbin. You know that one, right?
Yeah, and I really love that you're talking about adding style to your technical exercises and studies because, okay, you're playing the same rhythm over and over again, and you're obviously working on articulation, but it's written with a very predictable harmonic progression, which implies phrasing, which implies style and musicality. So I think that was a great example. So please continue.
Yeah, no, I think I always devote some parts of my practicing, both before I begin as part of my warm-up. I love to play etudes because it gets my brain cooking. Before I ever begin fundamentals, I love to read etudes because I think if, like I said before, your mindset before you begin working on fundamentals is so critical to how successful you're going to be, right? And you've been in school long enough too, and I'm sure you can attest to this, that like your mindset before you walk into a practice room, while you're in a practice room, and when you leave a practice room, to an extent, they all affect how productive you are and how you see your instrument, right? And so part of the reason why I focus on style is because it puts me in a really good mindset to be musical, to be productive, and to be really active as in my practice session. So I would go through. I love Arbins for these. I love Blazevich, like I said. Trumpet etudes. There's this Brandt book. It's like 26, 36. I don't know. Orchestral etudes. They're fun. Anything, honestly, that I have readily nearby. Sorry. And um, and my goal is to sound good and have great style. That's really what I do. And some days I gotta be honest, if it's a slow day, it might be a Bordoni that I need, to work on that style. And I kind of have to assess how I'm feeling, and I know I've done this long enough. I know what I need to put myself in a good mindset, and I do that. But working on style, I think, is critical as part of your fundamentals.
Cool. So let me ask you this. When I was in high school, it was definitely a lot of etude books that I worked out of. So we certainly have a lot of high school students, hopefully, and some college students that will watch this. So what would you say would be your top three etude books or method books that they should work out of?
For high school.
Yeah, high school or undergrad, whatever you think is important for developing style and fundamentals.
Yeah, for sure. So I really enjoy Blazevich. I think that's a great gateway drug, shall we say. I think it covers a lot of what we need as performers, as tubists, sorry. Other books that I really like, there's all sorts of them, wow. I really like, I would have to put the Bordoni in there. Although I kind of am gravitating more towards Concone these days, a little bit.
Okay.
The one that was published by,
Encore.
Encore. Yeah,
Encore.
thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great book. And that one, what I like in these etudes, both Blazevich and Concone, Tyrell, I really enjoy Tyrell. What I like is that they're easy to play with style, right? They're which isn't to say that they're predictable necessarily, maybe, but they're easy to play with style, and you can really I can work with a student on developing here really well, because usually you can sing them, for example, in Concone, right? If you want to work here, usually you can buzz them pretty readily. And so you can really work on, like I said, conceptualizing a sound and communicating it. Those are two things. So like I said, Blazevich, Tyrell, Bordoni, Concone. So
Excellent. So, it's really interesting to get a sneak peek at what makes a fantastic musician such as yourself, because you're talking about from the beginning of your day, you're focusing on sound, having a clear idea of what you want to come out of the bell,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
moving on to style, right? So important to have those things solidified, before you really even get into any of the other things that you have to practice. So how does that bring us to number three? Or I should say, what would number three be?
Number three is articulation. And I think you even articulated, even better than I could, which is this idea of the idea of really high standards coming into these fundamentals, right? And if your mind's not in it, you play until you are there, right? And so I would go back and play things until I'm there. Now we've worked on beautiful sound, we've worked on playing with style, right? The third is clarity of articulation. This is really important, I think, essential for any tuba player, right? Again, I have a lot of exercises that I like to do. I like to mix it up, right? One thing I really love actually is starting with double tonguing. I think these are from Arbin. I gotta be honest, I'm not 100% positive. I think they are. And I might do something like this. Going on and on, right? If you open an Arbin book, there's 6 pages of this stuff, right? And I don't do all 6 pages, right? I'm pulling things out and I'm playing them. And with articulation, I'm really focusing on tone, actually. I remember, I think it was something that Professor Martin said where, when we were working on articulation, particularly double tonguing, he would say, this has to be a tone study. More than anything, because articulation is a balance between clarity and tone, right? And so that's really what I'm going for as I'm working on my articulation. And while I'm working on it, I might employ certain strategies to help me improve, right? For example, there's another exercise I really like, and I'll kind of demonstrate to you how I might practice it. Whatever, who cares? I might say that's good, but it's not excellent. And I want to work on making it excellent, so I might go to the mouthpiece and really work on articulation and buzz the same thing. Etc. Right? And with buzzing, I really am focusing on the clarity of articulation. And like I said, I'm working here, and now I want to hear the results. Step 3, and so I'll go back and play it again. And so forth. And this is a process of repeating, practicing, repeating until I'm satisfied, right? And I don't do that for everything because we would be practicing all day long. But for certain things, I pick them out and say, okay, I'm going to do this at the highest possible level. And I go through those strategies to work like I did to get to that level. And so that's how I would approach working on things like articulation.
Well, let me follow up with you a little bit on some of the things that you were saying. So it's really interesting that you're talking about using the mouthpiece for clarity of articulation, because I also notice how even the sound was on every single note you just played. But using the mouthpiece with articulation, do you think of any certain syllables or vowel sounds?
Yeah, kind of. When I teach, I use a T, right? And actually, kind of the way that I conceive it, if I'm actually not even using a mouthpiece, is kind of like the word to, T-O, right? And I'll conceive it like this. Because that gives me the tone, or I'm sorry, the articulation, which is that T sound, and the tone, which is basically the O, right? So I might even go back to that step, just using my air, right? Because air is the catalyst for everything else that comes out of our instrument, is it not, right? So I might go back to that level, work there, and then translate that to the mouthpiece. I've modulated pretty badly. I do apologize. But you get the idea. You get the idea, right? It's starting with the simplest form possible, which I think of kind of as two. I know ta, maybe you're familiar, ta, da, I run into a lot, and personally I prefer a T. But
Well, it also sounds like you're so focused, you have such a clear idea of what that end product is going to be, that all of this kind of just takes care of itself.
yeah, I gotta be honest, I didn't start thinking about it seriously until I started teaching. And maybe you found this too, right? Because as a performer, and particularly in school, like I worked so hard to develop this in terms of like exactly what I wanted it to sound like, and that really guided me. But then once I started teaching, I realized, okay, you have to explain to somebody who doesn't necessarily have, 12 years or however long we were in college, you need to be able to explain the process. And that's when this sort of evolved for me. So as a performer, I think one way. As a teacher, I probably think just a little bit different.
What about for the double tonguing or multiple tonguing? What are you thinking as far as that goes?
What I'm trying to do when I'm thinking about multiple tonguing is staying out of the way, right? Because any note is a balance of clarity and tone, is it not? And we want tone to lead the way. The clarity is important, but if we have too much tongue, you know what that sounds like, right? So when I'm thinking about multiple tonguing, I'm really just trying to stay relaxed and let my air lead. So I'm thinking, and that's why when I do Arben, I'm really focused on tone, not really being, hammering home the articulation. Because I found, at least for myself, you can disagree, that if you have good tone, that clarity is important, but it's not like the be all end all. We want the front, but we don't want it to take up too much space. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's really amazing to think about how much time tuba players spend trying to get clarity, and that, it spans a wide range of things, including constantly searching for different instruments and different mouthpieces, etc. Which I know that last part is somewhat ironic for me to bring up, but anyway, it's really interesting what you were saying about Rex Martin talking about an articulation exercise being a tone exercise.
Yeah, well, this is part of. I remember this from. We used to have like morning studio. It was like a Monday morning studio class, which was devoted to fundamentals, which he was very adamant was not a warm up, even though it was at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. Which totally we all, were well warmed up before that. But I remember this because I think we were doing, again, from this Hal Leonard, I should attribute it to Arnold Jacobs. But he wrote his double tonguing exercises such that they would be a group of 16th notes and then, for example, a half note. And the idea was to match tone. For example, if I play it, it'll make more sense. So. That's not quite right, but it's some variation of that. And the idea is that when we multiple tongue, when we articulate, we're still embracing tone, right? It's not just about spitting out consonants in this case. It's really about playing with a great sound. And that this is, I think, something you really hear in Arnold Jacobs, who has, I think, one of the clearest articulations. But what you really focus on is this incredible tone, which substantiates the bulk of the sound that you hear, right? If we were to give it a ratio, I don't know, 70-30 or something, I don't know. But so yeah, I do think of it as tone, and that really helps, particularly my articulation, relax and kind of keep out of the way. I like to do a lot of transcriptions and things that have pretty articulate stuff. And what I've really found is that the more I kind of let the air lead and the tongue follow, the easier it is for me personally to play. So.
I just want to say, since you mentioned this, you didn't really talk about it earlier when we were talking about projects, but certainly your Goldberg variation transcriptions where you're playing duets and trios and so forth with yourself, just incredible and just so crystal clear. So everybody should definitely check that out. And we get a lot of videos because of the current state of things with the pandemic, but yours especially really, really incredibly outstanding. So my last question for you before we go on to number 4 is, when we were talking about number 1, establishing sound, you talked about not using the tongue. Is that something that you try to incorporate with your articulation studies, or maybe you think not using the tongue only has a certain purpose, or how would you work that in?
I don't. I'll be honest with you. I came to that through teaching. Personally, I didn't. I'm trying to think of any of my teachers. I don't know if maybe you can remember this with Mike. I don't remember doing stuff like this with too much, but I could be totally wrong, right? But the reason why I came to taking out the tongue is because I had a lot of students who were trying to start sound with their tongue, right? And you might know this too, where it's kind of a slap, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a bit of ka, right? And I think it's really important to remember that the air has to lead, right? And because a lot of times there's this sort of explosion, right?
Right.
And so with my students, I do sometimes a lot of exercises, mostly for just tone development without the tongue. If I'm working on articulation, I probably wouldn't do something like that, unless we're talking multiple tonguing on occasion. You know these exercises with taka-taka-ta, every now and then, very seldomly. So I typically use the absence of tongue just to work on tone. But that's only what I found in teaching, and that's only in the last less than a year. So it's really new to me. It's something I'm trying to get better at myself personally. So.
Well, I think you have a great start. If you're trying to get better, Lord help us. So what about number 4? I think that so far it's just already a lot of stuff to think about. But what's the 4th thing?
The 4th thing is I wanna play every day with like a really beautiful legato sound, right? This also helps. Again, I don't know if you as a teacher find this. I either talk way too much about air or not at all, right? There's no middle ground here. There's just none. It's like all or nothing, man. But I like to work on legato because I think it really establishes a smooth flow of air, right? It's like release, which is how we want to play our instrument. So there's a bunch of different ways. Again, I choose every day differently, but some of the exercises I really like. One of these I really enjoy. And what you might notice is that, well, you don't have the music in front of you, so maybe you don't notice it, which is great. But I'm really letting every other thing go in terms of I'm not worried about time. I'm pausing to take really healthy breaths because taking a breath in time is like a different can of worms, right? You know, I'm experimenting. There were some that I was curious about not using a tongue, and you heard that. It wasn't great. But I'm really focusing on doing one thing really well, which is just releasing that air in a nice way, right? I only want to do one thing at a time really well. And so I'll let other things slide in an attempt to work on, hey, let's play this really well, this legato. And so again, I wasn't super happy with that, so I would probably go back, to be honest. I would buzz it. I would probably just honestly play it again for a second time, maybe go back. And once I get to a standard that I like, then I'll move on, but not until then, right? But only a standard I like as far as legato. I'm not worried about time. I'm not worried about, anything else at this point. Just playing with a really nice legato sound.
Excellent. So, I mean, that was a scale exercise that obviously you can apply to all ranges, all keys.
Yeah, and we can think of any number of things. I mean, offhand, I don't know. Everybody, I'm sure everybody has variations of this, right? We have, we have all sorts of, we have Schlossberg wrote a ton of them, It really varies. It really, really varies. And some days I may feel like doing really isolated work. Like I'll do some really specific slurring studies, Like that sucked. So I would go back and do it again. And I'm still not happy with it, so I'll go back and buzz it. Right? And then I'll go back, right? And there's a process, right? I think it's really important, especially for students to realize, and hopefully this isn't a cop-out for me, but like, I still need to work on this stuff. Like, I've been playing the tuba for a while. and it doesn't come natural unless I do it every day, right? And so I think that's really important to focus on, improving in these little increments, but it has to be done consistently. Otherwise, you can lose it really quickly.
I think you're making such a great point also about trying to focus on one thing at a time, because when you're trying to get your slurs smooth, that is definitely something where, especially for these challenging ascending slurs where you're adding vowels, um, I think the only way you can really get it better is that you're only going to have to, you can only focus on just the slur, and everything else like rhythm, time, whatever may have to kind of go by the wayside until you get it. So, but again, I think this certainly touches on what you're saying about having that sound in your head, knowing what a smooth slur truly sounds like. So, and it's also excellent, Jess, that I personally think that that's one of the more challenging things to do on a brass instrument, and definitely on the tuba. I heard a recording, I think it was you with the Tanglewood Center Orchestra doing Mahler 1. It was broadcast on the radio, and it was definitely, the third movement was definitely very, very smooth. So
Thank you. You know that those A's. You know what I'm talking about? Those A octaves.
yes.
Those are the worst. I remember that summer. I mean, I had wonderful experiences of Tanglewood, but those octaves, and so I think, in preparing something like that, then you really have to isolate just even that interval. You have to be even more specific and just isolate that, So it really, how I practice fundamentals really varies what I need it for, and what I'm preparing for.
So you would train differently, say, for example, if you have a recital coming up or an audition or a chamber music tour.
For sure, for sure. And I remember when I was in the New World Symphony, one of the cool things is that, you're playing an orchestral program on a week-to-week basis, which coming from the school environment is totally different. And there were certain weeks where, for example, we did Prokofiev 5, right? And so you really need that lyricism, particularly in that like mid-low register, like mid or mid-low register. And so I did a lot of exercises just focusing on that, but conversely, if I'm preparing for like that solo competition in Italy, I needed a lot of technique, right? So I picked consciously things that were kind of more focused on that. That tended more towards like Arben, for example. Like I would do that. If we were playing, in an orchestra, or if I'm preparing for like an audition or something like that, then it's a little bit more broad and encompassing. But if I'm preparing for something specifically, I try to think about, okay, what skill set do I need? It's like, do I need lots of technique? Do I need, a great sounding low register? Do I need a little bit of everything? And I think that has to factor into how you choose to do your fundamentals, because ultimately your fundamentals serve for what you should be, to help you prepare for whatever you're preparing for, right?
Sure. Absolutely. It's great stuff. I mean, we're training. That's what we're doing when we do fundamentals. So how about number 5? You've gone through an incredible list of, again, not just what develops you as a tuba player, but what makes you a great overall musician. How about your 5th thing that you would practice?
The 5th thing is I want to get this evenness across all registers, right? This is a broad category, which could encompass a lot of things, right? I love scale exercises, for example. Oh, sorry. Is my sound okay? I totally turned.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I might choose a scale exercise that's going to get me from the bottom to the top of my register. For example, I don't know. And I might ascend, right? And then I might take the same exercise and go down. And the thing is, I might choose to vary it up, right? I like to be creative when I practice, right? So I might decide, okay, let's articulate something. So and going down, right? And so I might choose something like that that's going to really get me all over the horn, right? And my goal, when I say evenness across all registers, is to have a consistency of tone from one to the next, right? I might choose lip slurs, right? I don't know, some variation of a lip slur. Some variation of that. It really varies. I like Schlossberg every now and then, right? You know, these are really tough ones though. And so forth. And I would refine that, right? And so I want to basically make sure that every register is even from one to the next, so that you're not hearing a crazy change in color either as I go higher or lower, right? And so that's how I'll approach it. That really varies. The thing I like about this list is that, first of all, you can hit a lot of things. There's just a huge variety of repertoire you can choose from, right? You can focus on these things in etudes. You can focus on them in excerpts. You can use solo material. Really anything, as long as you choose to focus on what I've talked about, which is sound, style, articulation, legato, or registers, right? The idea really is more to just fine-tune each one of those skills to a really high level. That's kind of my thought process.
I think that this is such great advice, especially for students, or really, I've been talking about students, but certainly anybody who's trying to improve as a tuba player, because I think what you're talking about really focuses on not only becoming a fantastic musician, but things that you need to think about as a professional musician. And any of the fantastic professionals that I've had a chance to be around throughout my career, these are all things that they think about. These are things that they teach. They have various ways of doing it. But this is definitely, I think, critical for becoming a great professional. So I cannot thank you enough. Before we end, though, there's just a couple more things. First of all, the bonus question, I don't know if it's a bonus for you, but it's definitely a bonus for me and our millions of viewers, is if you could only practice one thing, what would that one thing be?
It would be style. It would be style. Because ultimately, I mean, our goal is to communicate rather than to just... Our goal is to say something with our music, not just to be accurate. So it would be style.
Okay, great. So the one thing would be style, which I think is fantastic. So just to end here, please let us know how we can keep up with you, how we can follow you, whether social media. I'm assuming that we won't be able to, unfortunately, come hear you play in a live venue right now, but where can we find you?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, live music is tough right now. So I'm planning on doing some more of these little recording projects just for fun. They mostly end up on Facebook, I think. I don't know how to use any other social media like Twitter or anything, and I'm very proud of that. So yeah, Facebook, I guess. But no, I have a website, which I definitely updated at least once in the past year. Yeah, I would urge you to check that out. And anyone who's, in that potential college age, please definitely give Appalachian State a consideration. I love working with budding musicians. It's kind of a surprise to me, honestly, maybe for you too. Like I had no idea what teaching would be about, and it's really cool how it's evolved, for sure. So if you're a prospective college student, please by all means drop me a line.
I definitely would second that. I know that Beth Wiese is a fantastic teacher. You're somebody that I've known for a long time. So it's great to stay colleagues and to keep up with each other. Hopefully, we'll be able to do this live at some point. Let me just clarify one thing. It is bethwiese.com, right?
Yeah.
Can you spell your last name for us?
Yes. Wiese.
I think that we've covered so many great things, and I think that hopefully, especially this last bit, will be motivation and inspiration. Is definitely motivation for me to start practicing. So, Dr. Weiss, I can't thank you enough, and I certainly hope that you stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Stover. I appreciate it so much.